We go directly to the last panelist of this session with Joost van Tomme. The floor is yours. Joost, thank you.
Thank you, Christophe. Can you hear me? You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, very good. That's good news to start. Good afternoon, everybody, distinguished colleagues, Chairman, President, Mr. Reuters, and the other colleagues of the panel. First of all, thank you for inviting us at ASEA, the European manufacturers of not only cars, but also vans, bus, trucks, everything on four wheels, I would say. We're based in Brussels. We're doing representing the European industry, and we're very interested in what's happening now on the side of the roads and the suppliers to the roads. This discussion comes very timely, so I think the subject is very good. And also, as Mr. Riquet mentioned, also as rapporteur, the next year in the Parliament will be key for all of us in terms of infrastructure development and regulatory impulse, I would say. It's a dynamic discussion which we're going through, and I think it's a win-win discussion. And I will tell you why in the couple of slides that follow. On the next slide, you will see we talked a lot about ITS, CITS, about connectivity, data economy, data sharing, but we haven't talked yet a lot about automation, automated transport. There was a Commission's document in 2018, the road to automated mobility, automated transport. I think one of the key issues that my members, my OEMs see is that we need to have a good fine-tuning of the environment around the cars, around the trucks and the vans and the buses. An automated vehicle becomes an intelligent IoT device, Internet of Things device. It is actually something that is able to sense and feel the environment, not only the physical environment, but also the digital reality. And it can be weather conditions, it can be road assets, it can be speed limits, reading, etc. But this vehicle, and in the future, automated vehicle, will have to interpret these signals. So to have an intelligent decision-making process, somewhat with AI and without AI. That depends in the terms of use case. So our vehicles make decisions based on what they see, what they feel, and what they have learned in the past. It's a kind of deep learning process going forward. And then the vehicle will have to give a signal on how to react. Will it be a braking system, a steering function? Will it alert the driver? Will it alert other drivers, like truck platooning, for example, or connected vehicles connected to each other? So that ecosystem is new since 5 to 10 years for us, maximum 10 years, but it's really now hitting the core base of our automotive industry. It's not only about decarbonization for us or about green mobility and clean mobility and safe mobility. It's definitely about smart mobility as well. And there, I think, hand in hand with the road operators, the road authorities, the concession authorities, but also the suppliers to the roads, I think we can do hand in hand what we need to do. The next slide, you will see then what we did in ASEA, a kind of publicity. Please go on our website. We published an automated driving roadmap. How do we see the future and the likely future in the tomorrow, after tomorrow on automated driving? What it is, automated driving, what it is not. It is, for example, it's not ADAS, it's not automated, it's not helping functions, assisting function. No, it is the car driving for you. It's the car being driven, you being driven by the car or truck or van or bus. It is a level 3 and beyond, as we say in the official jargon. This is a document that we discussed lengthy with the colleagues of DG Move, the team of Claire and others, but also DG Connect and DG Grow, and especially now with the CCAM partnership that is being established now. It's a check of a legislative framework, and I come back to that later on. We have a multiplicity of regulatory frameworks on automated driving, quite complex, quite also international driven by the UNEC, Working Party 29 and 1, and this has to be approximated or being translated in European law and the national law. So this is something that indeed will be very relevant for the TRAN committee. So an open invitation to Mr. Riquet also to continue our dialogue in this, with also the chairwoman equally from France of the TRAN committee. On the next slide, you will then see, given the limited time, 7 minutes, so Christophe, tried to do my best, our priorities on how we see this discussion. First, it's not only about pedestrianization, about having cities with less space for vehicles or for, I would say, vehicle mobility. It is about co-modality. And I know it's not a buzzword, it's something my members, my OEMs heavily invest into. it's not only about promoting cars, trucks, vans, and buses. It's about promoting mobility. Mobility becomes a service industry instead of a producing manufacturing industry. So that needs to be in the heart of the future EU transport rules. We have voiced our concerns of the TEN-T review, which we welcome, of course, but also in the multimodal approach. That's one. Second, we think that urban mobility, for what it is as a European competence, should be more inclusive. It is not only about the, I would say, the pedestrians, about the ride sharing, about the bikes. It's also about vehicles. If you see the COVID-19 situation, unfortunately, in which we are all into, it's thanks to the trucks, thanks to the fire, police, and so on. They're all driven by cars, by vehicles. So they have their space. Obviously, we know that urban mobility has another big issue. It's on air quality, it's on giving space, also in terms of safety. So we're also trying to be inclusive in this. Furthermore, and it's very good to have the roads community here, it takes two at least to tango, even more than two. We want indeed mandatory targets for member states on charging and refueling infrastructure. The AFIT directive that Harold Reuters was referring to is indeed something that is cumbersome. It talks about national plans. It has to be submitted. It's about the redistribution in the member states of percentages. We want a more targeted driven and mandatory approach for both sides, by the way, not only for member states. It's deployment for all vehicle types, like Harold was mentioning. Electric charging for passenger cars is totally different than for commercial vehicles. Hydrogen is a totally different segment as well. That's why, hand in hand with IRU and many other stakeholders, we plead for also good truck parking spaces along the highways, the corridors. There is a delegated act on that under the ITS directive. We definitely want also to profit from that, to leverage it for alternative fuel infrastructure, for obvious reasons. Fourth, and that has already been mentioned by the Commission, it's a coordination which is gradually being done by DG Klimaat, DG Envy, INER, and MOVE on the climate change, I would say Green Deal, mobility management policies, and there are a lot of them, and air quality policies. We want to have a more consistent approach, like we plead the same for the data strategy. We have the common European data spaces, there is the Data Act, there is the delegated acts under the ITS, some of them under review, and there is all kinds of initiative also in DG GROW on access to data. We would like to favor a more inclusive approach with the industry, and I think we're making very good progress on that. Allowing automated vehicles, it has been mentioned before, a lot of regulations there. Give you one example, ACSF or automated lane keep systems. Most of these regulations are being cocktailed or being negotiated at the UNEC with OICA and with others. And they're now being transposed in European law with DG GROW. And that is indeed one of the targets for us, but it's also, and even predominantly, member states. When I have the L3 pilot project or the truck platooning ensemble project, we have to go for a national type approval system, and it's not with a mutual recognition in other member states. We have testing requirements in Germany, France that are not always.
But we need to.
Yes. I will wrap up. Traffic rules the same. We need some more synchronization. There is good progress. And the last slide, just to mention the last slide, Christophe, it's about physical infrastructure. We have a discussion paper in ASEA with very clear ideas on how we see the road infrastructure, physical and digital, for the future. And we're happy to further discuss this with ERF. And we are in contact with Rick Nuitens and amongst many others. So these are just a simple common ideas that from us we would like to foster and really to take part in the dialogue. And again, Christophe and Mr. Riquet and everybody else, thanks for having us, and we look forward to the discussion. Back to you, Christophe.
Thank you very much, Joost, and sorry that I had to interrupt you, but I wanted to leave some time for the discussion. So we heard different points of views from the EC, from the vehicle industry, from the research part, also from international association. We heard about regulation specifications, financing, fostering innovation, and all these things, and we had a lot of information about what is in the pipeline of the EC. But I would like to ask all of you one particular question. We seem to agree about the necessity of investing into the infrastructure, but if you had to think in a innovative way, what would be your priority with existing or maybe new ways to finance the infrastructure for its necessary adaptation and upgrade? And there is also one question in particular to Herald. What are the strategy to embark on hydrogen fuel vehicles instead of petroleum fuel products?
Yes, thanks a lot, Christophe, for this. One idea is that we really would like to succeed in the rollout of alternative fuel infrastructure, 1 million charging and refueling points. We would like to do that in a bridged way with blending facility, an alternative fuel facility, and thereby ensure that we have both the market side and the public hand working together with all the market parties in the rollout. And we think, indeed, as Joost also was stressing, that we should possibly go for a stronger standard-driven approach, where we are kicking out the eternal question whether we can deliver in time or not, and whether this is accessible all across the network with a minimum level in all countries. That will be my big challenge for the coming 5 years. And I think it will be a major change of transport that we are going to see. So with that, I also would like to encourage further the discussion of this afternoon, and unfortunately also need to leave the panel here.
Yes.
Back to you, Christophe.
I know, and thank you. That's why I asked you the question in priority, because I knew that you have to leave. So thank you for your participation, Harold, and we will have probably other opportunities to forward some questions to all of you later on. But I come back to 3 other panelists. So what would be your priority? What do you consider really would be the best way to encourage proper investment in a traditional or a innovative way?
Yeah, maybe Christophe, I can speak there.
Yes.
It's a tricky, difficult question with many angles. You can have JUs, PPP, CPPPs. You can have indeed tolling systems, taxation systems, direct and indirect, etc. For us, who invests in what is secondary. For us, it's mostly what is our wish list and how do we see it together. In our dialogue paper with the road authorities and road operators, I give you some examples for automated driving within 2-3 years. Ideally, what we would like to see is a digital twinning of the physical assets, the physical infrastructure. Give you an example: speed limits, road signs, all these things, besides the lane markings and the usual day-to-day work. It is actually, and that can give us a quick win for everybody. In terms of cost, we understand that, especially for a long stretch, if there are roadworks and temporary deviations, that indeed this will require quite some investment, I guess, to build up this cloud system. We see similar things with the NAPs, the national access points, that are now going into a federation of the NAPs on the DG Move. That's fine, but we see 27 different NAP approaches. Yeah, for us, our vehicles, they are per definition mobile in terms of physical mobility across the borders. So more streamlining, more one cloud system. And I think in the European cloud strategy, this digital twinning of road assets and physical infrastructure would be ideal to do. And we're happy to co-explore avenues for that and share data as well. It's a win-win situation.
Thank you very much, Joost. Miguel and Pierre, do you want to add something about the general question?
Yes, thank you, Christophe. I don't have a magic bullet. I think the transport is a complex sector with a lot of implications, economical and social, and I think every single solution should be part of the system. But I think there's 2 principles, and I would say a third one, that would be a good lead. First of all, I think we need to acknowledge the contribution of the road sector and therefore subsidize it or partially subsidize it. Secondly, I think it's good that people understand that there's a cost in the use of roads, so they could partially contribute with the user-payer principle.
Definitely.
And the last part that I want to mention, I didn't mention in the presentation because it was a 7 minutes one, But I think financing the future of the road network is a big challenge, but it's not the biggest one. I think the biggest one remains the 23,000 people that are killed every year in the European roads. So when we establish a new financing mode, we have to be careful that there is no bad implications into the road safety. And today we know that putting tolls in some of the higher infrastructure, road infrastructure with higher safety qualities, have a bad impact in the rest in the fatalities. There's a lot of users that use secondary roads to not pay that tolls, particularly trucks or lorries, and there's an implication on the road safety. This has been proved in Spain with the A1 and with the A68 for the last 2-3 years. I'm happy to discuss further when we have the time. Thank you very much, Christophe.
Thank you very much, Miguel. Pierre, do you want to add something on the point of view of research, for example?
Not specifically. I would say that for sure, let's say certification and evaluation and also standards have to develop and to evolve in order to be able to catch the new trends into road equipment and into ITS.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, as you know, our time is very limited, so at least we gave you, all of you, the possibility to give an answer. There will be other questions that will be dealt with after the event, and if there are some specific ones addressed to a particular person, we will ensure that they get to the right person. Thank you to these first panelists, and I would like now to go for our second panel of this afternoon about how can road infrastructure be a key element in the development of new mobility. And I would therefore invite our 4 last panelists: Wanda de Bosch from the BRRC, Elena de la Peña from the Spanish Road Association, Ian Lefebvre from COLAS, and Mr. Jincheng Ni from France Strategy. And we will keep the same sequence for this panel, so all presentations and then a short debate. Thank you very much, Wanda. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Christophe. Thank you for inviting me. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm a representative of the Belgian Road Research Center. We are a national research center dealing with all the aspects of road infrastructure. So that means the traditional discipline of road infrastructure. I mean, design, material, study of materials, maintenance of the road, but we are dealing with road safety and mobility as well. So the title of my presentation, the first slide, please. Title of my presentation is Back Safer, Smarter and Better. So you know that infrastructure is one of the 3 components of the transport system. So that means that the 2 others are the vehicle and the human being. And so that means that to be really efficient, infrastructure should interact with these 2 other elements, and of course take into account the specific needs and requirements. So new mobility, what does it mean? Mobility of the future, I think it's shared mobility, connected, automated, with a very large diversification of modes and road user. So infrastructure should be safer. As mentioned by Amélie and Simon in the benchmark, I really believe that road safety is a crucial issue for our road infrastructure. Not only for the quality of life in urban area, but in a broad sense, crucial issue. So let me point out some safety issue dealing with new mobility. First, demographic trends in Europe showing an increase in life expectancy. So that means that we live older, and seniors are becoming more mobile than in the past, than before. So elderly people do not move and travel as young ones. Elderly people, but disabled people as well. So how can we guarantee them the access to the connected vehicle, to the connected mobility, to the micro vehicles, and so on? The second point about safety is about the conflicts between all the users. The conflicts between all the users are rising up. Not only the traditional conflict between cars and bikes or pedestrian, but conflict between electric scooter, pedestrian, what is the right place of the electric scooter, on the road or on the sidewalk, between electric scooter and traditional bikes and so on. Third point is about illegal parking operation in urban area. Public authorities are faced with a lot of illegal parking operation from these new mobility vehicles. So I'm convinced that every infrastructure project should analyze these safety aspects to be able to respond at the new mobility challenges. Next slide, please. Infrastructure should be smarter, so that means that road infrastructure should be well prepared for the CAV, connected and autonomous vehicle. Road infrastructure will require, of course, adaptation to facilitate self-driving vehicles. So the slide here mentioned few examples of this requirement regarding road signs or road marking. Road structure as well is very important because the increasing weight of vehicles. But I would like to point out that, of course, road authorities traditionally pay attention to physical infrastructure. But with the introduction of CAV, road authorities should be able also to pay attention on new areas, the digital infrastructure. So that means that for the exchange of data, road infrastructure will need to be completed by communication infrastructure. So that means that new competencies are required. Next slide. Infrastructure should be smarter. What does that mean? You know that the percentage of population living in urban area is rising up. And you know that sprawl, urban sprawl is very inefficient with a lot of negative side effects, more vehicle kilometers, more pollutant emission and so on. So that means that we have to concentrate our activity on a constrained space, urban space. So that we have to optimize the use of the public space. And therefore, I think we have to think more creative. What does that mean? Two approaches could be investigated, I think. The alternating assignment of public space over time. So that means that you can give a different use for different users in different time slot. And to think more vertically in the air, underground. And here you have a photo of a cable transport. And let me remind you that in London, the cable transport set up during the Olympic Games is still in use as a traditional transport mode. Next one. Next slide. Infrastructure should be better. Be careful with the parking. New mobility means new parking facilities, not the traditional parking facilities, but more improvement in drop-off and pick-up facilities, especially on interchange platform and at the final destinations as well. Next one. Next slide, please. And I would like to finish with another slide about the infrastructure should be better. And I would like to point out the quality of an infrastructure project. Quality at each step of the project is crucial. So that means for the design, of course, it's very important to integrate the specific requirements of all the users from the very beginning of the project, especially for disabled people or elderly people we mentioned before. During the building as well, the devil is in the detail. So it's very important to follow the directive and the prescription during the building. And of course, the maintenance is a key element. maintenance is crucial, especially to guarantee the accessibility for disabled users. City infrastructure is not it's not a good way to promote cycling and walking. So that's it. Thanks a lot for your attention, and of course, I'm available for questions. Back to you, Christophe.
Thank you very much, Wanda, for this presentation. I now give the floor to Elena de la Peña. Please, Elena.
Thank you very much, Christophe. It's a pleasure for the Spanish Road Association and for myself to participate in this interesting conference, and congratulations to the European Union Road Federation, the European Parliament, and the rest of the participants for this organization. We are firmly convinced that roads are key in the development of new mobility, and we need a safe and sustainable roads to allow new forms of mobility. This is something that previous speakers have already mentioned. Scooter cycling, which is very popular in some cities, in some countries, but not so much in others, and also the connected and autonomous mobility are part of these new mobility patterns. Next one, please. And today we are conditioned by the sanitary and the economic crisis we are living in this year 2020. And in Spain, as you will probably know, the situation is far from being good. There is an estimated unemployment rate of 21% for 2021, a reduction of gross domestic product up to 12%, and a serious impact in key sectors such as tourism, entertainment, and commerce, for example. And next, please. Yes, there. We completely agree with the Nobel Prize in Economy, Eric Maxkin. We will only get out of this with a massive investment in infrastructure. And for this reason, the Spanish Road Association has developed a proposal, and we have called it a plan for safe, green, and connected roads. These are concepts that have already been mentioned for the previous speaker. And it has been presented to the public opinion and also to the governments, not only the national government, but also the regional and local government. Our plan has been created to create jobs, would activate the economy, and would allow the adaptation of the infrastructure to the new mobility of the future, let's say electromobility, micromobility, and so on. And our plan is coordinated with the Agenda 2030, the Spanish strategy for safe, sustainable, and connected mobility, and it also fits in the principles of the European Recovery Program, Next Generation Europe. Next one, please. You can see in this slide a number of specific proposals that we have developed for rural roads. The first one is focusing in safety in highways, I mean single carriageway. This road network accumulates approximately 75% of the road accidents and victims every year in Spain, and I guess that is the same figures are also in other member states and other countries. And well, we are proposing to implement the scheme 2+1, which is already working well in several countries, like for example Sweden, that you know it's a reference in road safety, but also in Spain and other countries. And apart from these particular schemes to avoid the frontal crashes, we are also trying to promote the concept of forgiving roads, which is part of the safe system approach. And this is a strategy to try to avoid or try to reduce the number of runoff accidents and their consequences. And in addition, we of course need to focus, as we have been doing for the last years, in the high-risk road sections that should be sorted out as soon as possible, and if necessary, by the in an emergency basis. And secondly, this is a very interesting topic for us and for the road sector as a general, is to try to promote that well-maintained roads can reduce CO2 emissions of vehicles. In the Spanish Road Association, we have developed some trials. We are actually working on this. This reduction can be up to 9%, the reduction of CO2 emission for light vehicles, or even 6% for heavy vehicles, if we compare a situation of bad condition of the pavement and the good condition of the pavement. So do not disregard the maintenance potential to fulfill the environmental compromises. Other programs we are trying to promote here in Spain is the adaptation of roads for connected and autonomous mobility. And you will see that we recognize that roads need to be updated for connected and autonomous vehicles, taking into account the different levels of autonomy. And this requires investments, of course, and the identification of priority roads, for example, motorways of the main road network that would be like the first part of the road network to be adapted to the connected mobility. We want our mobility to be elective by 2030. Our colleague from DG Move presented a figure of 1 million points for charging for then 2025, and this is a very, very interesting figure that we should consider, of course. And well, if we want a mobility to be elective, we need to provide charging station in rural roads, not only in cities. So electric mobility should be a reality not only in the urban environment, but also in the rural ones. So this was also part of our plan. Again, in rural areas, we ask for support to improve the freight transport close to a small village and the populated areas. We'll maintain roads and small logistic centers for freight storage and distribution, which will improve the transport performance, activate the economy, and create employment. And finally, in order to activate tourism, that you know that it's a very important part of the Spanish economy, it's time to promote local roads in rural areas and to adapt them to the safety requirements of vulnerable road users. That should be at the center of the management, of course. Next, please, you can check with this animation that we have proposal for safe roads, next green roads, and also for connected roads. Next one, please. Well, and here you can find a list of plans proposed for urban roads where new forms of mobility are a priority. We are considering in the first action improvement and enhancement of sidewalks and pedestrian area in order to allow safe cycling, walking, scooters, and so on and so forth. Second one, the construction of specific lanes for cycling and scooters. We want this type of mobility, but we want this mobility to be completely safe and far from other motorized vehicles, to keep them separated from motorized traffic. We are proposing different approaches according to the size of these different cities. Another action is related to the redistribution of parking spaces in big cities. We are trying to keep them connected to the public transport if we want to keep vehicles out of the cities and out of the places where vulnerable users are going to have a higher rates of mobility. Another important topic is the low emission zones are also a reality in several European cities. For example, in Spain, we have a program, a political plan to implement them in all cities with more than 500,000 people in all the cities with more than 500,000 people by 2030. So we are asking to the governments to implement at least 1/3 of them, and this will undoubtedly push new mobility patterns in these cities. Another action, again, massive deployment of electric car charging stations, which is necessary for our mobility to be electric. And we need to multiply the number of vehicles, the electric vehicles we have in our cities and in our roads today. And again, we should also talk about other alternative fuels, not only electricity, but and today it's one of our priorities, but we should consider other alternative fuels. And finally, we are also proposing priority dedicated lanes for high occupancy vehicles. Some solution requires the construction of new lanes with high investment, but others will use the existing infrastructure and will be based in the use of intelligent transportation systems. And again, next please, there are plans linked to safety. Next, click please. There are some plans linked to safety, other for green roads, and another ones for connected roads. And finally, next, please. And finally, let me share with you some impression about the impact of these plans. We have estimated in Spain an investment of 32,000 million euros, which is not a small amount for the 12 plans that I have briefly presented. And we have estimated that a creation of 1 million new jobs, direct and indirect, that are probably going to absorb part of the unemployment that we are going to have in other sectors. We are trying to activate the economy to support the mobility and the future, and as a priority, keep transport safe and sustainable, especially for vulnerable road users. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elena, and sorry to rush you a little bit, but we need time for the others.
Sorry.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation. We will debate later. So, Jan, now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christophe, for giving me the floor, and thank you for the invitation to this event. Much appreciated. In a few slides, I would like to show you what the construction industry companies like Colas contribute to in terms of new mobility. Generally speaking, our motto, "We open the way," highlights our ambition, that is to be the world's leader in innovation and responsible mobility solutions. I couldn't say less than that, could I? The key message is that Colas strive to address the new expectations of mobility, as well as to accompany the evolution of everybody's behavior. Not to forget to take on board any specific needs of each local authorities. The smart mobility become a unique offer of smart and connected road that is to be versatile and multimodal too. It is therefore enhanced to fit a shared and safe public realm. Next one, please. The standard approach of mobility, usually focused on the transport only, have since evolved towards a level of service concept. The infrastructure is no longer designed just as a product, but it includes at the very early stage of design all the specifications required for maintaining its level of service throughout the design life of the infrastructure. The objective is then to develop the solutions in tight link with mobility ecosystems. That is to take into account the end users, the transport operators, vehicle manufacturers, OEMs, and network owners, mostly under the public administration. The road infrastructure is submitted to three main forces: the demography, the environment, and the digital rise. The road is the focal point for all forms of mobility, and it must remain so if we want to make sure that new usage can emerge. And we already said that it can be micro-mobility, active mobility, shared, the autonomous, the electric, and other decarbonized solutions. Next slide, please. Currently, there are two main ways we generate solutions from. As far as we are concerned, the first one is through our Center of Research, namely the Campus for Science and Technique. This is where we develop the core element of our mobility solutions, that is, the products and the materials. This is where everything starts from, to be honest. And at the end of the day, they turn into more complex systems to enable new functions. To give you two examples. One solution like Flowwell, this is a dynamic role marking solution, which you can see an example on the top picture. This is a bus lane which is lit up when drivers must give way to the bus. It uses monitored LEDs embedded in a very thin multi-layer structure, and it can be used ideally as a complementary system to a larger mobility service if we think of how to share the public realm in a reversible way. That is, at some point you want the road to be open and to turn it into a pedestrian area, and vice versa, depending on the time slot. The other example is Wattway, that is a way to produce renewable and local energy, again from a thin structure which is stuck on the road of the surface, this time containing photovoltaic cells. The other way for us of carrying out new services is through Mobility by Colas. This is a dedicated entity, and their activity is not related to construction works, although their expertise includes Colas's core competencies in construction and maintenance, obviously. And let me give you two examples of their mobility services to explain more in detail what it is about. The first one is Anais. This is a data platform for the use of the network owners. It collects information and gives the results of driving behaviors analysis. As a consequence, areas with safety issues are flagged up, and bespoke maintenance solutions can be suggested for an efficient asset management. The other example is MoveHub, which offers mobility as a service solution options, like being a one-stop shop for payment, price management tool, contracting process hub, etc. Next slide, please. Thank you. To sum up and to give you an example of the role of the infrastructure construction industry and how we enable the new mobility, let me show you another recent example of achieving big things together. The Insight EV Consortium. As nothing can be achieved alone, this was natural to us to answer Renault call to be part of this proposal to the European Commission Horizon 2020 project, which name is User-Centric Charging Infrastructures. Together with the car manufacturer Renault, but also Peugeot and others, some OEMs, universities, public transport labs, several European cities, consultancies, and energy suppliers who were awarded to start in January this year. More in particular, Colas have joined forces with City of Paris, Enedis, the energy supplier, University Gustave Eiffel, formerly known as IFSTAR, the French Administration Transport Lab, and French Institute of Decarbonized Mobility, VDECOM, to prepare and build a field operational test of dynamic wireless charging infrastructure. We are committed to upstream studies at the lab stage, to the job site construction methods, to the follow-up of this FOT, and up to the sharing of the recommendation in order to prepare any regulations or standards. Last slide, please. As already said many times this afternoon, there is no new mobility without financing the maintenance of the infrastructure, that's for sure. And as already demonstrated many times today also, only a joint effort between our industries can help deliver the solutions for the new mobility. And if it wasn't said once, it will never be said enough. And we, the road construction companies, well, we can enable this together with other stakeholders. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jan. And I now give the floor to Jincheng Ni for the last presentation.
Thank you very much for this participation. And I will talk about the case mobility, the connected automobiles, shared and electric mobility. I think this is the future of our mobility. Next slide, please. Because the mobility of goods and persons is an input that's a need for the life satisfaction of the people. Because when we want to work, to study, to consume, or to visit somewhere, we must to go to there. This is why we need the mobility. Alors, what we are waiting for ideal mobility in the future? I think in the future, the mobility is carbon neutral without CO2 emission. And we must be safe without accidents on the road or on the public transport. We must also lead the clean mobility without air pollution. And we must have a silent mobility because the road and the road transport is very noisy. And of course, we must have a fluid mobility without any congestion in the future. And of course, the mobility must be energy efficient mobility. Now, if we take all these indicators into account, we can say that the public transport can satisfy these indicators. But the public transport in the dense cities will not be sufficient to achieve all these goals because the public is not only in the cities. As each country has a vast territory, the cities occupy only 5 to 10% of the surface. This is why the road in the country and the new mobility on the road is necessary and essential both in dense cities and the interior to satisfy all these indicators. Next, please. I think for satisfying all these indicators, the mobility for the future should be smart. This means that connected, automotive, and electric and shared. Because if we have electric cars, we will be carbon neutral, and we will be clean mobility and silent mobility. If we have automatic, this will be the safe mobility because the automatic vehicles are more safe than the human-driven vehicles. And of course, if we have all these vehicles shared and connected, and we will need less traffic of these vehicles, and the congestion may be managed by the connected vehicles and the shared vehicles. And in the future, the mobility is smart, it will change the lifestyle in the city and in the territory. Because the mobility in this case is no longer for the only use, is no longer used only for trips. It is a life space, because in the vehicle we can we can work, we can consume, we can do everything we want, because we don't need to drive, and we don't need to arrive. And of course, the trip time now is a cost for the people who will want to work or study. But in the case vehicle, the case trip time is no longer a lost time, because it becomes time for the meeting, for the work, for the leisure, or even for the life, because you can see you can see watch a film or any other sense, you can, because you are connected everywhere and every time. Next, please. This is why I think the case mobility will reorganize the future life of the society. But if we want this future mobility, what we are needed for the infrastructures? Of course, the first one is the integration of the vehicle, the transport demand, and the digital equipment. And for the in case of infrastructures, we need electric charging station on the road and in the street, in the cities. And we must, of course, we have talked about the smart road and the motorways. And we must also have in the urban cities, all the streets should be smart. And of course, if we must connect the mobility, we need the high-speed telecommunication network. And this and for the autonomous vehicles for movement, we must have the high precision geolocation and the high precision mapping of all the road and the roads. And in terms of vehicles, of course, we must have electric cars or any other electric and shared cars and the trucks or other movement. And of course, on these vehicles, we must have a detection systems, and of course, and the compute capacity of the vehicles to be driven by the automatically. And of course, if we have all this, it's not sufficient. We must connect all the vehicles. This is why we need the networks and the platform for the case vehicles. This is why everything should be integrated. And the case mobility is of course all the digital technology. This is why in the actual society we have we begin the artificial intelligence, big data, cloud computing, Internet of Things, and the digital system security. This technology will be applied to the case mobility, and the case mobility will change the organization of the future of our society. Next slide, please. And if we look at the case mobility in the future, this will be the future maybe in 30 years, in 30 or 40 years. And in all these aspects, we have three major players: US, China, and Europe. What we can say that where are we now? In the United States, in the China, and in Europe. I think maybe the digital technology will be between the US and China. And what we will do in Europe? This is the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ni, and I'm sorry for interrupting you, but we need to stick to the timing. We had here an interesting panel when we heard about new mobility in general. We heard about safety, smart infrastructure, better infrastructure, service, maintenance, ecosystem, that we apparently need to think out of the box, be creative. I would like to ask the panelists, what do you think we can do to better highlight the essential role of the road for the future mobility? And also, what do you think, which sort of actions we should put in place and maybe see more often adopted to convince the decision makers about the importance and the necessity of the road infrastructure for the future mobility?
Well,
Yeah,
can we start?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, I will start. Thank you for the question, Christoph. From my point of view, I think it would be very interesting to provide some figures or real evidences to decision makers. Sometimes, every time we talk about how important is maintenance of roads, investment in maintenance, that well, all of us, we are aware of this necessity, of this requirement of our road networks. Sometimes when we are trying to promote the message that we need well-maintained roads because of the environmental concerns, they ask us for figures, for more information. So I think it's important that we develop the trials and not the necessary tests to try to provide figures as simple as possible, so that they can notice that we are really, this is really a serious matter. No, I think that's very important in order to try to strengthen the actions that we should do, and that the organization like ours are trying to promote from different member states.
Okay, thank you. Another answer?
Yeah.
Vanda?
Yes, I would like to remind you that about 90% of the road network is in the hand of local authorities with very limited financial means. So I think that we have to promote, to develop tools, methodology accessible for local authorities, especially for the road maintenance. So that means asset management, pavement management system, but accessible for them, because they have such a limited means to act. So I think that's our role as a research center to help them, I think.
Okay. Another person wants to give an answer?
I think that this is what we have been experiencing for a couple of years now. This is definitely to, again, to use some buzzwords, to break the silos. We must be understood and helped, and to speak together, that is, together with people from the automotive industry, people from the energy as well, people from the environment, to make our solutions a holistic approach, clearly, and to make understand that it is a long-term and larger perimeter issue to be tackled. And not only, if we speak just about road, okay, we will keep on talking about we have to mend roads to make it safe, fair enough, but it doesn't tackle the issue of larger mobility and the development of the new types of mobility as well.
Okay, thank you. Maybe a very short last remark, Mr. Nee?
And I think for the infrastructure, in terms of the infrastructures of the future of mobility, it should be the country, in terms of the state, should finance the infrastructures. For example, for the listener charging stations, for the digital development infrastructures, like the high-speed telecommunication network, or the Internet of Things on the road and on the streets. Okay, if the state don't intervene in this development, I think maybe we will take much more time to realize this. If the infrastructure is not in place, the future of mobility cannot be applied, because if we have only electric cars, it's not sufficient for change the mobility. We must have the electric cars shared, connected, and the automatic. This is why I think the strategy for a country is very important.
Okay, thank you very much. I regret that we need to finish this question and answer part. There will be probably some other questions that will be addressed to you. I would like to thank you very much for being participating to this panel. Now we arrive more or less at the end of the event, and I would like to invite Mr. Rick Nuytens, President of the ERF, to make the first closing remarks. Rick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christophe. Thank you for this interesting seminar. I'd like to really thank all the speakers and of course also the organizing team for setting this up. I think this infrastructure remains an essential topic. Of course, special thanks to Amélie and Simon for the study, and for Mr. Riquet for hosting this. As he mentioned, Europe is in for a lot of change, and also mobility and infrastructure is in for a lot of change. He mentioned several aspects, the environmental impact, the economic impact. So he even mentioned globalization, new ways of mobility, and also especially technology. And as mentioned by some speakers, there should definitely be more focus and more funding going to the introduction of new technology related to infrastructure, because today and also tomorrow, good infrastructure will remain the foundation for safe and smooth mobility. We talked about financing. User pays, polluter pays. Maybe pretty soon there won't be any polluters anymore, but user pays should definitely then create the funds, but then these funds should also be earmarked and make sure that they end up at the right users. And as mentioned by Wanda, we have different stakeholders, we have different road agencies, and they need to get the resources as well. Joost mentioned the synergy between car and vehicle. Of course, in the future, this is quite crucial. And also with ERF, we are very active in several platforms. We are contributing to the third mobility platform, where, let's say, the smart vehicle driver assistance is combined with good road infrastructure. Visibility of the road infrastructure should reduce further accidents. We are also, with the Road Federation, we are working with this at the CCAM platform. Again, as you mentioned with ASEA, we are looking at what role physical infrastructure can play, what are the essential criteria, what research can be done, how the interface, the synergy between vehicle and smart vehicles, how the operational design domain can be made more robust. And then finally, I think the ERF is also playing a very strong role at CEN TC226, where a new working group 12 has been erected some time ago, where also road adaptation to connected and automated vehicles. So how can the road create synergy again? How do public procurement standards, how can they do they need to be adjusted to make sure that the road infrastructure of the future is also taking machine vision into consideration? And also there is the win-win between machine vision and infrastructure, because there is a lot of data that will be collected by the car, by these sensors, and this can help in asset management. This can help to provide the raw data. So stimulus packages are definitely, as Elena mentioned, they're coming. They should get, a lot of them should get to the infrastructure, and I think the Spanish example here was great. So I'll leave it here. I'll give the word to Thomas. Thanks again for the seminar. Thanks. Goodbye to everybody.
Thank you very much, Rick, for these words. Now, Thomas Bauer, President of FIEC, I will leave you to give your final words.
Yeah, thank you, Christoph. Ladies and gentlemen, first, thank you all for organizing and participating in this web conference. It was very interesting. And let me just add a few closing thoughts. Mobility is one of the basic needs of people. Moving is essential for our social lives, and it will stay like that. Mobility is essential for businesses too, and it has become more and more important to business as industry and trade have become more interconnected with complex supply chains. Modern business structures without supply chains are not possible anymore. Mobility is at the heart of European single market. Freedom of movement of goods, services, and persons, impossible without mobility. And mobility always needed infrastructure, roads and tracks, and ports for ships and planes. Any society was built on transport networks. Just take the Roman Empire as an example. However, mobility is also a burden, both for people and the environment, for example, through noise and other emissions. The only way to deal with the existing problems of mobility is to improve the systems for mobility. We need to make mobility more efficient and environmentally friendly. The construction industry plays a major role in this change process. In cities, we need to improve the road systems a lot. Parking traffic has to go underground. The roads have to be changed in such a way that there are tracks for cars, bicycles, and pedestrians. Electric bicycles will play a major role in future urban traffic, but unfortunately only in summer times. In cities, but also for medium distances, the train systems have to be improved. There's still a huge need for additional subway systems. Between large cities, the network for fast trains has to be upgraded to reduce air traffic. Roads on the countryside have to be improved in such a way that they do not disturb the people as much as today. Reduce noise of tires by better surfacing of roads. Reduce stop and go traffic by underpasses, modern electronic traffic control system, including road signs and many other means, which will reduce emissions and harassment to people. Roads have to be improved for autonomous driving. In example, 5G data transmission cables in the ground, better alignment of roads, and so on. Around the roads, the supply systems for vehicles need a lot of change. Electric charging stations, including more rest areas during charging time, hydrogen gas stations, and a lot of other things. With all of these needs in mind, unfortunately, Europe also has a tremendous backlog of maintenance in the transport network. Especially our bridges are in a very bad stage. A big effort has to be made to overcome this maintenance backlog. This effort should also be used to improve the system to modern needs. For this, the planning and approval system have to be made much more efficient and faster than today. All of these needs target investment and regulation by the European Union and its member states. We need an ambitious revision of the regulation about the Trans-European Transport Network, TEN-T, to make the TEN-T best in class in terms of high quality infrastructure. Moreover, Europe needs recovery from the corona pandemic. A lot of money has to be spent to get our economy back on track. This should be done in such a way that the money is spent for future needs. The improvement of mobility networks is the right answer. Investments in infrastructure are investments in a sustainable recovery. The built environment is key to success. Only with additional efforts we will succeed to build the transport systems for a better environmentally friendly mobility for people and businesses, for good life and prosperity in Europe and all our countries. Thank you very much again for this interesting afternoon.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for your kind words. We have now reached the end of this seminar. I will leave Mr. Dominique Riquet, our host, making the final address. Please.
Thank you. It's not so easy because it was very rich. In few words, I think that road will remain, and from far, the main mode of transportation for goods and persons, and probably an essential actor for recovery and development in the future. So we want it remain the principal mode of transportation, and as such, probably the main tool for our future development. We have. I want to thank all the speakers for the quality of the presentation and for the good resume of the jungle of project, of problem, of concern, of possibility for the future. It was very interesting. I want just for finishing this very interesting meeting to see if in few words what are the position and the concern of Europe, of the European Union, and the regulator and the parliament as such. We have, I think, two roles. At first, a role of regulation is not always the more easy, but I think it's very important to be present about normalization, for example, electric plug and so on, for the definition about a juridical concept. For example, when we are talking about autonomous vehicle, who is responsible for hazardous, for accident, and so on? Is the fabricant, is the user, is the furnisher, and so on. And we have to make very important definition about that. We have to protect the data of the user and the data also of the industry. We have also to be present about the Green Deal and about emission and environmental topics. And we have also to put in place some regulation about that and some control too, and the tool of control. We have also to intervene about public procurement. Is also a question of, for example, is a question of sovereignty, but also a question about maintenance. The president attest talking about the concept of maintenance, and we think that it could be included in the public procurement, for example, because it's probably a better solution to have a proposal at the beginning of the project. And secondly, after regulation, we have also a topic about that. We are also an actor for the financing. We definite a network and then connectivity at the European level, but we are also present as a player of the financing with European funding, direct funding, or to loan or grant and different tools. And we support, and I think it's very important, also the research and development about all the topics that we have listening to during this meeting. So we need for a safe, smart, comfortable, environmental friendly, and free circulation on the road. And the road is not only a passive platform, but the tool of the future. And I think that such meetings are very useful for me as a regulator, as a legislator, but also for a very complex network, a very complex system. And we need to have connection, not only connection on the road, but between us to exchange and to go via better regulation, better tool, and better enterprise to support what is probably the most important revolution and not evolution about the transportation for the future. And I was very happy to be present with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Riquet, for this wrap up and this very interesting vision about the road infrastructure and its essential role for the future mobility, how it is important for our future as citizens. So now we have reached the end of this event. I'm convinced you found it interesting and instructive. Please note that we will forward responses to the questions that were asked and we could not deal with during the event. I also would like to confirm that the recording of the conference, as well as all the presentations, will be available in a few days. I would like to thank all the participants, all the speakers, the panelists, the organization team, and more particularly, of course, our host, Mr. Riquet. And I wish you all a very nice evening. Thank you for your participation, and bye-bye.